Hey, are you afraid of talking about the 2024 big test because you don't want to look like them? Well, you really shouldn't feel that way. I can understand why you feel that way because I have felt that way myself. But nonetheless, let me point out a few key differences between the 2020 big test and the controversy surrounding that, and the 2024 big test and the controversy surrounding that. So in 2020, what we had was a controversy based entirely on conspiracy theory. And in 2024, we have a controversy based around a legitimate theory. Now, of course, you should be thinking, hey, well, what's the difference? Is a conspiracy theory just something that you don't agree with, and a legitimate theory is how you would describe anything that you agree with? Well, no, it's not. There are two key differences between a conspiracy theory and a regular legitimate theory. So those key differences are based around the evidence and based around falsifiability. So a conspiracy theory will be based entirely on conjecture, and a conspiracy theory will be unfalsifiable. There'll be no way to actually disprove it. Whereas a legitimate theory will be based on evidence, and there will be a way to disprove it. It will be falsifiable. In 2020, what you had was allegations based entirely on conjecture. And when these allegations went to court, that's where we would see the difference between conspiracy theory and a legitimate theory. In courts, reality thrives and conspiracy dies. And that's because in a court of law, you're not allowed to lie. And believe it or not, everywhere else, essentially, you are. It's considered your First Amendment right to say whatever you want, even if you know that what you're saying is not true. And so it's not an offense. It's not a criminal act to lie anywhere else. Even to the media, to the public, in political debates, you can say whatever you want, but not in court. So in 2020, 62 cases were brought on behalf of the DT campaign. And only one of those cases won. And that case in Pennsylvania was not even about anything related to wide-scale fraud. It was just based on a technicality about how many days extra time did mail-in voters have to rectify any problems they had with respect to providing their identification. So normally you have a certain amount of time, I forget how much time it is, but the state of Pennsylvania provided 3 days extra time past that deadline, and the court ruled that they shouldn't have this extra time. So the court sided with the DT campaign on that technical issue. It had nothing to do with any kind of big test fraud, and it affected both sides. You know, whether that was a vote for the red team or the blue team, neither of them would have those extra 3 days to, I believe they call it, heal their ballot, to rectify any problems with their identity for a mail-in ballot. So that's it. That was the one case that wasn't dismissed or thrown out of court. And many of those other 61 cases that failed resulted in the lawyers who brought those cases forward on behalf of the DT campaign. A lot of those lawyers lost their licenses because of the bad faith arguments they were bringing, because of false evidence that they brought, false allegations they were making. And Rudy Giuliani was one of those lawyers who lost his license for bringing that case forward and for essentially making false allegations to the court. Now in 2024, what we have is entirely different than what we had in 2020. We have concerns based on objective, verifiable evidence. In fact, the very data that says that DT won the big test also suggests that he cheated on the big test. Essentially what we have is data that, when organized in the correct way, shows a very dramatic, undeniable trend, and that is that the vote percentage for DT increased as the number of votes per polling station increased. And that is a well-known fingerprint of ballot stuffing. Now, another key difference that I want to point out between 2020 and 2024 is in 2020, it was the campaign for DT that brought forward these allegations. In 2024, these concerns are being brought forward by a number of nonpartisan, not-for-profit organizations that are simply concerned with having fair tests in the United States of America. One organization is the ETA, and the other organization is Smart Elections. Another key difference is that in 2020, what the DT campaign was seeking was to have courts overturn the results of the election. In 2024, what these organizations are asking of the courts is for the courts to compel a number of state election boards to simply recount the ballots. That's what they're asking for. And that's what leads us to the final difference between a conspiracy theory and a legitimate theory. A legitimate theory is falsifiable. And the way we could falsify or prove this theory wrong is if we recounted the ballots and the ballots agreed with the results that were derived from the electronic testing machines. So please, don't feel foolish about raising the issue about the 2024 big test. It's a very important, very legitimate issue, and it is based on real objective evidence, and it is a falsifiable theory, and all anyone is asking for is to prove us wrong. A final thing that I want to point out is that it is rather risky to talk about this issue on this platform. My account could disappear any day. And so I want to point out that I do have a backup account on YT. It's called Green Neighbor Policy Watch. If you would be so kind as to subscribe to that account, that would be a way of following along with my content if my account on this platform were to be shut down. Related to that, I would like to highlight the fact that a really great account called The Voice of Reason, or VOR, was shut down. They have set up a new account, and I would encourage you to give them a follow. You will find them at Radical Left Thug. I would encourage you to follow them and give them the audience that they deserve. They do great work on this issue and many others. Finally, I'll just remind you that I will be doing a live stream with Brandy this Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Daylight Savings Time. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.